guys, what is up? My name is Megan and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I hope you guys are doing well and staying safe, and welcome to today's video, which is my June wrap up. Now, June was a very fantastic month for me, both reading and reading wise. So I read 12 books in total, and we have some really good ones in here, and a lot of them you haven't heard me talk about because my June reading vlog is going up later. Anyways, but I thought we would add a little twist to this, and I'm basically inspired by reading Nymph. I will leave her video down below where she does a smash or pass wrap up where she tells you if the book was a smash or a pass, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the book and why I think it could be a smash or pass depending on its target audience. So without further ado, let's hop on in. So the first book I want to talk to you guys about is actually one I'm still in the middle of, and that is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I'm taking this in very slowly. I'm like 600 pages in right now, so almost halfway, and this to me is both the equivalent of a smash and a pass. And the reason I'm saying this is because this book is divided up in two parts. The first part, full-on smash, absolutely loved it, was very intrigued by this book and the way it was going. I absolutely loved the characters we were following, and I think that has a lot to do with why I love the first part of this book so much. It wasn't hard to get into at all, even for me who is not a very big fantasy reader. The second part for me is more of a pass because we are following one character who I love, and for that it is great, but we are also following characters who I absolutely do not care about for the moment, and it feels like this book really dragged for me in the second part because of that. I am a very big character development and just character reader. I strive to enjoy the characters I read, and just that's like what gets to me. And if I don't care about you, I won't care about your character arc. I won't care about any of the things you're doing, and I feel that way about a lot of the characters in here. It's very half and half, and so it's between a smash and a pass. However, going back into the third part, I'm going back to my favorite characters, so I do have a hope that at least the third part will be yet again a solid smash, and we will see how the rest of the parts of this go. So it's a smash and a pass all at once. The next book is definitely more of a smash, and that is Nic Blake and the Remarkables, The Manifest or Prophecy by Angie Thomas. Now, I will preface this by saying it took me a long time to finish this book, and it is not at all a big one. Because the beginning of this book was very slow for me. I feel like because I've been reading a lot of like chosen one trope middle grades, this one felt kind of repetitive, and I don't think it was the strongest start to a middle grade. However, the second end of this totally redeemed it, and honestly I absolutely loved it, and it definitely takes the chosen one trope and kind of flips it on its head, which I love because I haven't read a lot of middle grade who do that. And honestly, Angie Thomas is a fantastic writer because this book is like a high fantasy middle grade book. There's a lot of creatures and learning about things, but there's also a lot of discussions about Black history, and I think that she does that incredibly well because for the target audience, I don't think it kind of bogs down the rhythm and the speed of the story, but it also is very informative in a way that is super helpful to the middle grade age range. So if you don't know what this book is about, we follow a main character named Nicole, Nic for short, and essentially at the beginning of this book we learn that Nic is alone with her father, that they moved a lot for reasons Nic doesn't really understand. Sometimes her father just picks them up and kind of leaves town. They choose another town to settle in, and so she is very much like, it's my dad and me against the world. However, at the beginning of this novel, her dad's is taken away, and he's kind of blamed for a very big crime within the world Nic is part of, which is the Remarkable world where people have powers. Nic is aware of her powers. Her father has been teaching her about the history of her powers and all the different creatures. However, he has never taught her how to use her powers, and so this book is about Nic going on a quest to provide evidence that her father isn't guilty. Along the way, she goes with some friends, she meets new people, learns a lot about herself and her family history, and it is a fun, adventure-filled middle grade with a really cool magical system, and I will definitely be picking up the sequel for this one when it comes out. I'm guessing next year. Y'all, I talk too much. I need a drink. Okay, on to book number 3, which is Zodiac Academy: The Awakening by Carolyn and Susan Valenti. They're sisters, I think. This for all intents and purposes, should be a definite pass. And if you are a critique of writing, of structure, of pacing, you're not gonna like this. You're not gonna like this if you're going into it with expectations of it actually being a well-structured novel. You're not gonna like this, just skip this. Also, it is a pass if you're not into committing to a very big series where not a lot happens. However, for me, this ended up being a smash. Now, I did give this 3.75, and just by the way, I gave Nic Blake and the Remarkables 4 stars. I'm not sure if I mentioned that. Because the writing is not it. It is not, I'm not a picky person when it comes to writing, but it is not structurally proper at times. It has a lot of typos within the book, and it's clear that it is not a very edited book, unlike some of the other indie published books I have read. So it's not an indie thing, it's just a Zodiac Academy thing. However, I ate this book up. I sat down, read the entire thing. I was absolutely obsessed because there's just something that keeps you reading, and it's the way that this book is. I guess maybe it's the pacing. We follow our main characters for like 3-4 maybe days, maybe a week at max in this book, which is almost 500 pages long. But it's just the way it's written, and the way our main characters are written, and the way they learn about the fantastical world they are now a part in, and the way the boys treat them. It's just a whole thing that for me got me very enthralled, and I was like, I really need to know what happens next. And the end of this kind of ends on a cliffhanger, which really wants you to get into book 2. You also want to see who they're paired off with. So if you guys don't know anything about Zodiac Academy, which at this point I feel like everybody has heard the premise of this book at least once, it follows 2 twin sisters who are Geminis, and at the beginning of this book they're kind of struggling to make ends meet in our world. They've been in the foster care system and it's not been the greatest time for them. And then this strange man starts following them and ends up telling them, like, you're the heirs of a crown in this like fantastical world. People have been looking for you for years. And at first they're like, what the hell? But they end up going with the man because their situation is really crap, and he's promising like food and a place to live, which for them basic needs have not been met. So they go and they learn that they are like the heirs of a crown, and like that this world has been waiting for them. But currently there are 4 boys whose families kind of join together to, I guess, form some kind of like government to make sure that their world keeps running. And so it's a bully romance because the boys don't want them to succeed because they want to keep the power, and they're also attracted to each other. It's basically a bunch of teens with a lot of hormones and a lot of power at play, and it's kind of them getting introduced to the world and fearing for their life because they are very much being bullied. This is very much a bully romance, and usually I don't enjoy them, but this just, it did something different for me, and I'm absolutely obsessed. I will be continuing on the series. I've talked about it several times how much it surprised me, but again, in all its technicality, it should be a pass. The next book I read was The Last Word by Taylor Adam. This is a thriller book that was recently released by the author of No Exit, so this book got a lot of buzz. I myself have not read No Exit, but I ended up really enjoying The Last Word, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So for me, it's definitely a smash, with the caveat of me thinking that this book does not do the best for mental health representation, which is why this is not a 5-star. And if that's something that can be triggering for you, especially anything that has to do with like psychoses, schizophrenia, all of those triggers, this is a pass for you 110%. Do not bother with this book. If you're not at a good time in your life, I do not recommend going into this. If animal abuse, if the loss of a child are triggers for you, this is a pass. 110% a pass. I feel like nobody has been saying this on booktube, and I just need to reiterate, because knowing me, there are some of my biggest triggers in here, and if I was not at a good mental space, this book could have definitely ruined me in like the snap of a finger. So please, if you use Storygraph, please use the app to look at the trigger warnings before you read this, because this is a lot. It's a lot thrown in together. However, I really did enjoy the pacing of the story, and it is the first time in my life, and I feel like a lot of people have been saying this, that I care for a thriller main character. Usually the main protagonists are either unlikable, unreliable, or just you don't really care about main characters in thrillers, but I would have given my life up for this main character and her dog. She is extremely relatable for a reader, and just for her love of her dog, honestly, she is a champ, and I absolutely loved her, and I feel like this book is definitely different in that area. If you haven't heard of The Last Word, it essentially follows a main character who is house sitting in this like secluded area where no one really goes in the winter time because it's like a tourist beachy area, and so she's house sitting to make sure like the plumbing and everything don't burst on this person's house. And you know that she was previously engaged, but that she and her husband, like, they're not together physically in the book, and you are led to believe that something happened to her husband. And basically she's there with her dog, and to pass time she's been reading a lot of, you know, those like 99-cent Kindle books, and she reads one which was recommended to her by a neighbor, and she's like, no, this is absolute trash, 1 star, leaves a 1-star review on a site like Amazon or something, and the author actually reaches out and is like, take down your review. And so at first she basically holds her ground. She's like, this is a space for readers. No. And weird things start happening after that, and it's basically us going through it with our main character. As I said, I really loved the pacing, the writing style, the main character, but there's a lot of trigger warnings, so it's going to be a pass for a lot of people on that front, but I highly recommend it as a thriller if those trigger warnings are not related to you or the way you're feeling currently. I would definitely recommend as a thriller. It was a really fun time. The next book I have to talk about is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is my first book by this author, and I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars, and for me this is an absolute smash, no questions asked. This is essentially the story of our main character who is hella unlikable, and basically she went to like graduate school in English literature, those kinds of things, has one book that was published but didn't do very well, and since then nothing really remarkable has happened in her life writing wise, or just in general I guess. But she is friends with this girl named Athena who is, I think she's Chinese, and basically she is like at the top of the publishing industry. She has had several book deals with significant amount of like money intertwined with them. She is currently like planning on getting one of her books adapted to Netflix. However, at the beginning of this book, they are hanging out together and Athena dies, and our main character basically out of jealousy and pettiness steals Athena's manuscript, which nobody had seen yet, and publishes it as her own. Now this manuscript is about Chinese labor in the, I believe it's the First World War, or one of the most important wars that has happened in our time, and it kind of reflects how poorly the Chinese people have been like treated throughout history and throughout that specific war, and how much like they contributed to the world we know today. And so our main character decides that like the white people in here probably weren't that bad, and so she kind of first whitewashes a lot of the characters and also makes them white people not as bad in the novel, and basically she just steals someone's work, publishes it, and gets all the fame and the money and everything that comes with it. But then the stuff starts to spiral. People are questioning how she could have written that, also questioning the fact that a white person would write that kind of book, and there's a lot of issues with representation, and our main character is just basically living the Delulu life. She is very in denial about her actions and is trying to convince us that it's not as bad as it seems, and it's just a whole thing. There's discussions of racism in the publishing industry and also in general, and it's also talking about just so many things, the importance of readers and writers within the community and the respect that one should have towards the other, and how the writing space and the publishing space wouldn't really happen without readers, and that readers have their their weight in publishing. And it was just very interesting, especially with everything that has happened over TikTok with that author who went bananas when someone gave her a 4-star review, and just the whole thing that kind of spiraled out of that recently. And I feel like it's a very timely book, and I just loved R.F. Kuang's writing in this. It was honestly fantastic. It blew me away, really. I then want to talk about a book that I feel like is not getting enough hype, and I am aware that is like a new release. However, I still think more people should be reading it, and that is Rubi Ramos's The Recipe for Success by Jessica Parra. This is a young adult book, and I don't read a lot of that anymore, but I definitely think this one is worth the read. It is a full-on smash in my opinion. I gave this 4.75 stars, and it is really one of the best discoveries I've made of the year so far. This follows a main character who is Cuban, and she now lives in America. I think she was born in America, but her parents immigrated from Cuba to America. And side note, this is on Voices. And basically, at the beginning of this book, we are kind of set in Ruby's current life, where she's in her senior year at school. Ruby loves to bake. Her parents own a bakery. However, she has a ban on baking, where her parents don't want her to spend time outside of her work hours baking, and they want her to focus on getting into college because she is like on the track to become a lawyer. But our main character isn't sure that's what she wants. However, she's going along with the plan because she feels a lot of guilt and pressure because her parents have given up so much of their lives so she can have a better one, and so she kind of feels like she owes it to her parents to go along with that success plan that they have in their heads. Now, within this book, our main character enters a baking competition and kind of hides it from her parents, while also trying to get into college to kind of fulfill their dream. And it is kind of like the clash between our main character's dream and her hope for the future and her parents, and kind of what meshes together from that. It is a book of self-discovery, of acceptance, of learning about one's heritage and the sacrifices your parents have to make, and what it is to be an immigrant in a country like America. It is beautiful, but there is also some light and tender moments between our main character and her friends, as well as the main character's love interest who we meet in this book. And he is also going through it with his parents and the parental expectations that come with graduation and wanting to do things that are different from what your parents expect. Their romance is absolutely adorable. Now, I will say the 0.25 stars I've taken off from my rating, why it's 4.75 instead of a 5, is because I wish there was just a tiny bit more romance between these two, but it is still very present, and I think that it beautifully affects both of our characters to kind of learn and stand up for themselves. And I feel like the outcome of this book was realistic and beautiful, and it was lovely. If you guys are fans of Nina Moreno, I highly recommend Jessica Parra, and I recommend this book in general. The next book I have to talk about is When in Rome by Sarah Adams. This is 110% a smash for me. This was a 5-star romance, and I'm so happy I read this. This was incredible. This is Sarah Adams' first book in a kind of like companion series, and it follows Amelia and, why am I blanking on the main? Noah. Noah is the main male figure in this book, and this is dual perspective, you guys, which I love Sarah Adams for that. And Amelia in this book is a famous pop star, and Noah owns a bakery shop. Now, the way they meet is that Amelia has had enough of the pressures of being famous and a pop star, and she's supposed to go on tour soon, and she's just like freaking out and having a life crisis, and she's just very tired. And so she does like one of the characters in one of her favorite movies. She takes off and goes to the closest Rome to her, which is Rome, Kentucky, where Noah lives. And basically she gets stranded there, and he helps her out, and she ends up staying at Noah's until her car is fixed, and it is their romance. This is set in a small town. We meet Noah's siblings as well, and they have a beautiful relationship. We learn more about our two characters' backstories. Noah is kind of grumpy, where Amelia is a sunshine, and it's just such a beautiful and pure connection. Both of them are guarded and have issues in their lives which would cause them to have a difficult time entering in a relationship together, and they just try to find a way to kind of make it work. They're both reluctant at first, so it kind of takes some time for them to admit to their feelings. this was sweet, it was beautiful. I feel like both our main characters had enough time to develop themselves, and I loved both of their backstories, and their romance was swoony, and I absolutely adore Noah. He was my pick for the mid-year freakout tag for newest fictional crush. That man has the most beautiful core values ever. Now I will say Sarah Adams does not write spice, so this is a closed door romance, but I don't care. 5 stars. The last full-length novel I have to talk about before I go into manga is my favorite romance book ever now, and that is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This is a 110% a smash, and as I said, favorite romance book. This is the 3rd book in the like STEMinist books that Ali Hazelwood has written. She obviously has those novellas as well, and it is definitely my favorite Ali Hazelwood book of all of them. This follows a main character who is a theoretical physicist. She is she has a lowly position within the STEM world and the academia world, and so to compensate for her income, she does this fake girlfriend gig, and she meets the male interest because he's the brother of one of the guys she's like pretending to date, and they don't really get it off, and she doesn't really understand like why, but like that's not her main focus, so she focuses on the people in the family that her client is like, you need to win over my mom, so that's kind of what she focuses on. However, they meet outside of that setting when our main character is interviewing for a, I think it's like a tenured professor position, and he's part of the interviewing committee. Now our main character is a theoretical physicist, and our main male lead is an experimental physicist, and within the science world there is very much a competition to see kind of what is more worthy, and the main protagonist, the male, years prior had actually written an article that was like bogus, just a bunch of crap sprinkled in with a little bit of theoretical physics, and sent it off to this kind of review committee to publish as an article, and basically it got accepted, and then he was like, it's complete, like, I wrote some bullshit to prove a point that like experimental physics is superior to theoretical physics, because like what is even theoretical physics if you're accepting these kinds of like academic publishings? And so it kind of started a rift between the two fields, and our main character hates the person who did that, but she doesn't know it's him, and basically it's a academic rivals to lovers. This book is absolutely beautiful. It is also the most sciencey out of the 3, which was fine for me because my love of Big Bang Theory, I feel like it's very similar to this book. It's not similar at all, but it does have some similarities with the experimental and theoretical physics. And I will be making a full review on this, so I don't want to go too into detail, but I just want to say our main female character has type 1 diabetes, and as someone who has a sibling who has type 1 diabetes, the representation in here is so important, and it made me cry so many times because I don't think people realize how difficult it can be to live with type 1 diabetes, especially in America if you don't have access to healthcare, which is the problem with our main character, and how life-threatening it can be. And I don't think I've ever seen such accurate representation both of what it is to live with diabetes, because I'm very close to my sister and I know how hard it can be and how expensive it is, but also being on the flip side where a male character tries to help her deal with her diabetes. And I will always do, like, I would give my pancreas to my sister if I could, so that she could not have to deal with that. And I think that the love and motivation to help care for someone with this was so well represented in this book, and I'm going to talk about it more, as I said, in a full review, but I feel like nobody online has mentioned our main character has type 1 diabetes, so if you're looking for that kind of rep, it's in here. It's great, and if you want to learn more about what it is to live with diabetes, I highly recommend this one. And the romance was beautiful, the caring for each other, and just the entire thing to me was phenomenal. His feelings were beautiful towards her, and I could talk about this book for hours, but I will not. Let's move on to manga. I'm gonna make this section quick, and if you want more of my thoughts, I highly recommend going to see my first manga taste test vlog, which I will leave in the cards. But during that, I read 3 volumes of manga. So quickly, One Piece, the first volume in like the entire series, and the arc, which the arc is East Blue. I gave 3.75 stars. I really enjoyed this volume. However, I think that this is something that is to be enjoyed more as an arc itself than an individual book, and so I think that in order to make up my mind on One Piece, I would need to read the entire East Blue arc before I can say any more on this. Again, go look at that vlog if you are interested in my thoughts, but I would say this was a smash. Then we have Tokyo Bound, Hanako-kun, and this is the first, again, in a kind of like mystery series. Y'all, my throat is dry. This was a pass for me. I gave it 2 stars, and the thing is, a sweet commenter on here, sweet viewer, mentioned that this is very much inspired by like lore and myth in the Japanese culture. I believe it's Japanese. And I am not aware of any of that, so it is my fault, and I would need to review and go online and learn more about it before I continue on with the novels. But I just think that the storyline was kind of going in a million places that I really didn't understand, and I just feel like the time jumps did not make sense in my mind. And I thought we were going to follow this character here, who is a ghost haunting a bathroom. But we kind of follow a female character and we see the ghost, and it was just not what I expected. And for me, this is a pass, and I say it's a pass if you don't know anything about the myths and legends that are talked about in this series. The last book I have is Spy Family Volume 1. This was a major smash. I gave this 5 stars. It is my first 5-star manga volume. I am obsessed. This is humorous, adventurous, well-paced. It's just adorable. It is so many things, and I highly recommend watching my vlog just for my reactions on this. The last book I read was Below Zero, which is the last novella in the Ali Hazelwood Load to Love You collection. I'm not going to talk too much about it. Essentially, I gave it 4 stars. I think it was the weakest out of the 3. I did like that this has kind of like an Arctic expedition vibe, and it's like I'm gonna protect you kind of vibes, but I just feel like the romance and the chemistry was less believable and more like insta-lovey, which is why I gave it 4 out of 5, but I still highly enjoyed it. And for me, that Load to Love You collection was great. Such strong novellas, and overall I gave the first 2 5 stars and this one 4. So yeah, those are the 12 books I read in June. I hope you guys enjoyed this smash or pass version of it, and I will see you very soon with another video. Bye guys, happy reading.